Today is the first day of the NCAA Diversity and Inclusion Week, and it's the 7th episode of Leaning Into Discomfort, which will highlight the day one theme of My Story Matters. And Jordyn and I are here to say that we're more than just athletes, and we're both excited to share our unique experiences with you and provide a window into what it's like to really be in our skin. And I will start by introducing myself. My name is Kate Hawley. I am a sprinter on the men's and women's track and field team, and I'm from Chicago.
Hi, my name is Jordyn. I'm a sophomore at Middlebury. I'm from Hoover, Alabama, and I'm on the softball team.
So Jordyn, first of all, how do you identify and how do you think your identity and your community at Middlebury has impacted how you view yourself?
It's been really interesting at Middlebury overall since I've always been in a majority white environment, and honestly didn't think much about being Black in those environments until I came to Middlebury. And I feel like at Middlebury it's been amplified in terms of I'm the only, not just Black female in the room. I might be the only person of color in a classroom, and I'm one of the only POCs on the softball team. So I feel like it's become more of an identifier in college. And even especially this summer, I didn't realize how my friend groups at Middlebury are also very white too. So when everything was going on, the protests about George Floyd and Breonna Taylor's, I felt I couldn't really reach out to my friends, and I could, but they wouldn't understand in the same way that a POC would understand how I'd feel about the situation, especially a Black person. So it's that's been interesting since I've only been here for one full year. So this year I'm trying to have my community be more of a reflection of who I am. So this year I've gone to more SAOC events, and I've gone try to be more involved in BSU, because to make a more conscious effort, because I realized at Middlebury I'm not just gonna run into Black people or POC just in my classroom. It's something I have to be conscious and seek out, and that's something that's good for my mental health and having people to connect with on campus on a different level.
Yeah, I think we have a little bit different experiences in terms of diversity, how we view diversity at Middlebury. I would say, I know that, we agree that, Middlebury is a predominantly white community. And it's interesting because for you, you're saying that you feel you have to seek out groups of color and communities of color on campus. And for me, I feel I came from an even whiter community. And so when I came to Middlebury, Middlebury felt super diverse to me. And I was there's another person of color in my class. That's just not happened before. There's multiple people of color there were multiple people of color on my freshman year hall. And so it felt like I was just being hit with all of this diversity. And I was it was so new. And it was crazy then to hear people would be Middlebury's not diverse. And I was what are you talking about? I actually have friends of color now. And it's just kind of crazy to think that just to really reflect on how white my community at home is. And, and then coming here, the fact that made it seem like this was a diverse community when, Middlebury, the reality is Middlebury has a lot of work to do in terms of diversity, and also more importantly integrating the diversity and not creating divides within classrooms, within halls, and that stuff.
Interesting that you view Middlebury as diverse. I feel there's a lot of people at Middlebury that especially since you said that's where you grew up. I feel there's people in Middlebury and they view Middlebury as diverse based on their previous environment. And then there's people who came from maybe it was a area that was like majority minority, and so they're just like
This isn't it.
this is not how. That's really interesting. In terms of, like, can you like talk more about what you meant when you're talking about to integrating, and rather than like just creating the bubbles on Middlebury campus?
Sure. Um, what I meant by that is that I think, and you can argue that there's a bunch of divides on campus with like wealth disparities, athletes and non-athletes. They're all international students. There's all sorts of divisions on campus. And I think it's definitely possible for us as people of color to seek out our affinity groups and to be comfortable within them. And I think that there's also something to be said about putting yourself in situations where you're not going to be with your affinity group. You're not going to be in spaces where you're super comfortable, and that's okay. And I think that that's something that we need to work on getting towards. Like, and I'm thinking like in like a classroom environment, for instance, when there are topics of race or ethnicity like in the classroom, how do we go about addressing that in a way that's not isolating the few like Black people in the classroom, for instance? How do you incorporate our perspectives and our voices into a classroom environment, into conversations, in a way that is respectful and not singling us out, not tokenizing us, and expecting that we have the answers, because we certainly like don't.
Yeah.
But yeah, just really working on not having divides within classrooms or within groups.
In terms of like the classroom, when you have conversations about race, because this week in my comparative politics class, we were talking about like authoritarianism in the U.S. in regards to like the South, and how at the time of like the 60s and even like post Reconstruction and things, like Black people were not living in a democracy. And me and this other girl in my class who's also Black, we were like, ooh, we're very like intrigued about like what like our white peers are gonna say about this, because a lot of them were like, oh, we're so surprised this happened. But like the conversation did not like, was nothing. Like it was very surface level of like everybody just saying, like, I was surprised they didn't experience a democracy. And me and my friend were just like, wow, I don't feel like we got anywhere in the subject furthering like your understanding of like how this affects today and things like that. So I feel like also at Middlebury, that's the thing, is even when you're in these classrooms, it's when you have conversations about race, they're very surface level, and I feel like they're in a way that like makes you feel like, makes white people feel like, oh, like I'm learning more. But it's like, honestly, like as a POC in those classrooms, you're like, I don't feel like y'all are really learning much more than like I've grown up with knowing already.
Yeah, I'm thinking some of my architecture classes were talking about redlining, and I'm just trying to think of ways in which I can bring something to the table in those conversations, or how we as people of color can contribute to help share our perspective if we're comfortable with it. And I know for me, for instance, like back in high school, I wasn't comfortable speaking up on that. My my school actually, for Martin Luther King Jr. Day, they had a day of seminars, and they wanted me to attend a workshop called like, why should I feel guilty for being white? And I was like, it doesn't make sense for me to be in that space, um, and I think to now, and how I'm able and I'm comfortable to talk about redlining and like its impacts on like myself, for instance. And I was like comfortable and willing to share how it's like impacted like my grandparents, for instance. Like they, Chicago was an area that was severely impacted by redlining, and it's something that's been outlawed for like 50 years now, but it really divided the city and into like the north side, which is more predominantly white, wealthy, and then the south and west sides that are just filled with like marginalized communities. And my grandparents live on the south side, and they're like south side of Chicago, like I'm sure you've heard about it. There's a lot of crime, violence, low income communities that are struggling, and they're trapped in these places because of discriminatory policies of the past. And like that was something that I was able to share and to like add to the conversation in class and be like, yeah, well, like I actually have an example, like my grandparents are like and have been like stuck on the south side, and like their upward mobility was actively suppressed because of those policies. And like those policies are like, the point being here is those policies, that's our history. And I think we've gone through so much schooling now where we're learning about these things, but we're never or at least I should say I've never really been in places where we've been able to bring in Black voices or marginalized voices, because I've just always been in predominantly white communities. And that's where, that's what I'm talking about when I say like, oh, like the integration in classrooms, because that's a place where I think Middlebury having a little bit more diversity than my high school, for instance, that's a place where where me like feeling comfortable, I'm able to like speak up and bring that in. But it's tricky to do. And if you're not comfortable with it, not everybody is. And there are topics where I'm still like not even super comfortable talking about. And it's hard. And I would imagine it's hard for the professors too. And it's hard, I would also assume, for our white peers in classrooms to know, and to really like understand, what it feels like to be in that classroom.
At Middlebury, I feel like more of a responsibility to speak up because like there are not that many like Black people on campus. Whereas in high school, it was me being like, oh, I don't know if I want to like speak up about this or that, just because I knew there were like other people who were experiencing the same thing in a way that it was like we were more so that there were multiple other people that were like speaking up about things that were happening at school. So it was like, oh, I don't have to, like we already have people that are doing this. Whereas like at Middlebury, it's like I feel more of a responsibility to just like bring up certain things in conversation. I was talking to my friends and I was like, oh my gosh, where's my like student ID? And they're just like, oh, I don't know, like why is it a big deal? Like you're just like going down the hall or something. And I was like, oh, well, after the incident happened at Yale where like the student was like asleep in the common room and they like called the cops on her or something saying like she was not a student there. I'm like, I always carry my student ID. And that's like something my friends like they didn't know about that event. And then they were just like, wow, I never like thought about if somebody came up to me not thinking I went to Middlebury to like have my ID on me that often. So it's like, I know I try to like, when things like that happen, I try to bring up to my friends just so like they maybe like get some new knowledge about like things that don't necessarily personally affect them, but it's like they affect me. And like, I feel like as my friend, if you don't care about like things that affect me, like, are you really my friend? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, in those situations, those are opportunities for everyone to grow and really like start to like learn from one another. And I think it really comes down to, Jordyn, like what you're saying, like the importance of conversations. And like I think it's really great that like what you're doing and like that you're like finding these situations and you're not just letting it slide and you're not just like turning a blind eye, and you're like kind of identifying these opportunities for education, I guess. And I think that's really, really important, especially like in today and in given this wave of social justice movements, where a lot of people, they don't know where to start, and they don't, I've had people and Jordyn, I don't know if this has happened with you also, but I've had some like my white friends come up to me and like they just don't know how to, like they want to talk about certain issues. So like for instance, they wanted to check in with me after the murder of George Floyd, and they didn't know how to bring that up. They didn't know how to have that conversation because honestly, like, we hadn't really like talked about that stuff before. We hadn't talked about race or my identity before. Um, and what I've noticed is that after having those conversations, um, the floor is open. There's a lot more room for growth. Um, and that's like, and we both benefit from those conversations. I benefit because I feel like I have another ally um, on a deeper level, not just like the surface level, like, oh yeah, like, they're my friends, so like they're probably an ally. Like, I know that there's a supportive relationship that's been established there. And I think they benefit and they get a little bit of my perspective. They get to see things through my eyes and see how certain things, certain events affect me differently than they would affect them.
Like, have you like seen that on like your track team and things like that? Like, I'm pretty sure like track is like one of the more diverse teams at Middlebury.
Mm-hmm.
So like, how does that like come into play?
Yeah, I would say, there are a lot of socio-political issues, I should say, that are, that our communities are facing. And you look at, okay, like police brutality, for instance. And I should say first, what's important is that, we acknowledge that they've always been there. Like these issues have always been there, but they're only now being uncovered by this like larger group, this group that's like consisting of some of our like white allies. And that's great. And that's the climate right now. And I feel like that and also like we as allies, we have almost like a responsibility to respond to this climate. And I would say that like my track team community, and specifically like the athletes of color on my team, and also like the other mixed athletes of color, like they're there to support me as I am there to support them in the face of these issues. And I can give you an example, like I was saying, so in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, I was deeply unsettled by this, and I was able to talk about it with my mixed teammates and with like my other teammates of color. And that was, a time when we really supported each other, and we had conversations that, I had never had with anyone before on, for instance, like, what does it mean for us as mixed individuals? What does it mean when we're pulled over by the cops? And honestly, like, they're going to see us as Black. They're not going to see us as white, even though like we're 50-50. And acknowledging that reality is really scary and unnerving, but having that community, for me, like having the mixed teammates, that's something that I really needed to help me through and kind of begin to process things. And yeah, it's just like, it's a really special community to me, and I'm very grateful for it. And I know that, and I'm like, part of the reason why I'm grateful for it is because I know that a lot of other teams on campus aren't as diverse as track, aren't, I could very well be on a team that had like no other mixed athletes, no other athletes of color. And I just feel like very fortunate that I've been on a team where I was able to like make friends who were mixed for like the first time in like literally my whole life, outside of my sister. And like, and, and that's something that like, and I don't know if you want to touch on this with your experience on the softball team and diversity there, but, I just feel really grateful that I've been able to have a more diverse team than some of the other teams here, and how that's kind of just really fostered a great community for me.
Well, I feel like on the softball team, like it's not diverse really at all. So I know in the wake of George Floyd, like our coach, we had an optional Zoom that you could go to discuss it, and like the full team like didn't come. So like personally, I know for me, I was kind of like, does my team like realize that this affects me, like that this is something that is like I like it's gonna make this is something like I've cried about and things like that. Do they realize like how this affects me as a Black person on the team? And so it kind of like made me more aware of like my identity on the team and like if the team actually sees that. And I know it kind of makes me want to like help diversify the team by like when we bring so I don't there's not like another girl who comes up later who, like feels the way that I feel like I know I want to be there to like help her through Middlebury, depending especially like if they came from a more diverse environment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been interesting time because like I know for me it's like difficult to I don't know necessarily how to bring up the conversation because I can feel like some people, especially like in sports, like you view like your sports atmosphere as like, oh, this is like a place I get to chill, relax, like we're not doing school and things like that. So I feel like I don't know if I'm able to bring up that conversation because some people do view that conversation as more of a burden, like, oh, we have to have another conversation pertaining to race. And like I'm at softball, I'm supposed to like relax and chill and focus on like my sport. So I know for me, it's like I don't want to like bring it up and make them feel like it's like a burden. And then for me to like see that they see it as a burden is not going to make me feel good about myself because it's not something I choose. So it's been an interesting time right now, which is what made me like seek out like student athletes of color so I can like have those conversations. Cause like I didn't really go last year, so this year I've been going to see other students of color.
So, Jordyn, I don't remember if we've talked about this before, but I feel like one thing that we should acknowledge is the fact that, you know, Middlebury, while it might feel diverse to me, it's not diverse. And neither are really, neither are our teams that much. Um, but that was a conscious decision, I feel like, that we both made. Like we knew, at least I should say I knew coming in to Middlebury, that it wasn't known for being diverse. I knew it was going to be entering into like another predominantly white community, and like specifically on my team, I did like look at the roster and to see like, okay, well, am I going to like once again be one of the only people of color on my team? And I'm wondering, was like the diversity of the softball team something that you considered, or the diversity of any team, something that you considered when you were like applying to colleges?
I was not recruited for softball, and I was injured my junior fall, and then I was not in the country during the summer before senior year. So I was like not looking at softball really. I was like, okay, I guess this is the end of the road for that, just because I like, didn't have the chance to like really talk to coaches and things like that. So when I came to mid, I had just like emailed my coach and I was like, hey, here's my stats from senior year. Here's my highlight tape. And she was like, oh, I like what I see. Come on the team. So it was like that kind of ordeal. So, and because I'd been on predominantly white teams my whole like softball time of like how many, like 9 years or so, it wasn't like I didn't view it as a big deal. But I think it's like my teammates like lack of like diversity throughout their life is like something I like never thought about before until like I was on the team. And also I feel like back home, it's like I go to school, my classrooms were like on the more diverse end, and I go home and like I and my family all live like close in area. So it's like I'm seeing like Black people in my family at home, things like that. Whereas like when you're in college, you're like always like in the community of your college. So I feel like that was an aspect that like took some adjusting too. I mean, I chose Middlebury for language, period, because I'm about to declare a joint poli sci Chinese major. So Chinese was like the big reason I came, being that it's one of the best language programs in the country. And for me, I was like, I'm not gonna let the lack of diversity prevent me from coming to like this great school for like my later goals in life. So like that's why I was like, I come from a background of like majority white areas. I can deal with it for another 4 years, especially if it means that like I'm gonna be getting the best education in what I'm pursuing.
Yeah. I think I had a very similar outlook on that in the sense that I knew that I had survived a predominantly white environment for 18 years of my life. And I was like, what's another 4 years, you know? And so that, the diversity of Middlebury wasn't something that I like really considered, except for the fact that, I did take a look at the track team, like I said earlier, to just to see, like, I just kind of wanted to know what I was getting myself into. Um, and, I would say that I've been pleasantly surprised with how, my time at Middlebury has kind of like shaped my own understanding of my identity, in the sense that, like, for instance, so like I'm mixed, and my dad's black and my mom's white, and they got, Jordyn, I don't remember if we've talked about this before, but like they got married 25 years after it was legal for them to do so. And it obviously, like, it took some time for things to change around, for views to change around like interracial marriages. And so I really didn't have people who looked like me growing up. I didn't have any like mixed friends, like hardly any friends of color. And I like really just didn't know how to navigate the space. And I would, like, my parents couldn't even help me because they're not mixed, and being mixed is like something very unique where, you feel like you don't fit on either side and yet you fit on both. And, that can be like kind of like isolating and confusing. And so being able to come to Middlebury and like really just like recognize like, oh, there are friends here who look like me. I have teammates that look like me. Knowing that, okay, well now like I feel comfortable around them, and we can have, like I was talking about earlier, we can have conversations about it. And kind of realizing that it's like it's okay to talk about race. It's okay to like accept my identity. And like the people who taught me that were largely like my teammates of color, and specifically like my mixed teammates. And it's all about like, like we're similar, and we can connect in ways that like we haven't been able to connect with other teammates in the past. And that's just something that's come out of Middlebury where I just like wasn't expecting that.
I think I had similar aspect of like embracing like my identity, because like it was never something I thought about in high school, but like now in Middlebury, it's like I feel like way more. I feel a lot of pressure on myself at Middlebury, because like I feel like because it was amplified, I was like, I am like maybe the like first time that some people have had like been in the classroom with a black person. Like I have to come across as like super smart all the time. Like I can't ask like dumb questions, things like that. But I know like this year I'm like, no, we don't need to like put all this like pressure on myself. Like it's not like my responsibility to be perfect, because like that's like I can't be perfect. But it's like it's interesting in terms of like how I've embraced like being like a black female at Middlebury, whereas like it wasn't something I thought about ever at home, whereas now it's like something I have thought about more. And I'm not even gonna lie, like at a time last year it was like I kind of viewed it as more negative. It was just like I constantly have to like do everything perfect in class. Like you can't be late. I didn't feel like I could ask like certain questions, because I felt like, well, it seems like majority of the class gets it. And I don't want to be the one person that doesn't get it. But also like I'm black. So it's like I can't look like I'm like the dumb black girl, and I don't want to seem like, oh, she got in because like affirmative action. Because that's literally something that happened in high school. Like somebody was like, oh, she only got into this school because of affirmative action. So that was something that last year, I was like, wow, I wonder what it'd be like if I didn't have to be Black at this school in a majority white space and putting all this extra pressure on myself. And that's something I never had to confront before. Whereas like now I'm just like, I'm I'm just gonna be a person. Crazy. I'm not gonna I'm not I will make mistakes and like I will grow from it. It's gonna be fine. And it's honestly not on me. Like, yes, I should like try to be the best that I can, but like it's not on me to be the representative of the entire Black community. Like that's not a burden, like it's not a burden, but it's like that's not a pressure I need to put on myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, what you said there about affirmative action is really interesting. And it's kind of these ideas that kind of are just always like hovering over me, and have been like throughout my 4 years here at Middlebury of, why did they let me in? Why was I admitted? And I think you can't help but wonder, and I think a lot of athletes wonder, like, was I only admitted because I'm an athlete? There's like that bubble that we have, and then we also have the one of, was I just admitted to like bump the numbers up, to bump the Black population up, like, and basically, yeah, like, was it just like a numbers game? Was it just about demographics? That's something that it sucks that I have had those thoughts. And that's something that, I've worked really hard, academically to kind of prove those thoughts wrong, and to prove that I belong here, and to know that like I don't have to justify my like admittance to this school. I think that that's something that like I really didn't start feeling like confident, and that that I belong here. Like I feel like I didn't really feel that until maybe like last year. And I honestly, I don't know why. It might just be pure just like growth throughout college, and just like, oh yeah, like, I'm like knee deep in my major, like, I'm taking classes that I'm like, I've like, they're not just like 100 level classes, there are classes where I've had like, other like experiences with. Perhaps like that's part of it, but I don't know, I do think there's something to be said for like just the fact that like we've had those like kind of those like bubbles above us, those questions kind of lingering and just like trailing us throughout college, and you were saying also throughout high school. It's I don't know, I think that's something that a lot of people might not realize that we kind of go through.
My brother, he went to Washington Lee, another PWI small school. So I know for like us in our family, we're like, we tried to like get that idea of like, oh, did I get here because I'm just like bumping numbers and stuff, by being like, well, guess what, you're there anyway. Make the most of the experience, take advantage of all the opportunities. You got there, now you're there. If it was you don't even think about like how or why you're at the school, you're there.
Yeah. But I'll just ask, so Jordyn, now as you're kind of learning to make the best of this Middlebury community, what do you think is necessary for you to be able to like feel comfortable in your skin before you leave Middlebury?
Well, I know for me, it's like making sure I have time for myself. Now, like I like to journal, so that's like really good for me to just like have the time to be by myself. It's really like outside, because Middlebury is pretty nice in the fall, and also I feel like finding those like my affinity groups on campus has been nice to know that I'm not just here by myself. Like I'm not the only one going through this. So that's been like something that has had me make the most of my community. And also a big thing for me personally is like I want to make an impact on the campus for the better. So I know for me, like I'm pretty involved. Like I'm in softball, and like whenever our coaches like wants us to talk to recruits, so it was like really exciting because there's a Black recruit, and I was like, "Girl, come on, I got you! Like, come and I got your back." So I know for me, it's like I want to have Middlebury be better than when I came. Like, it's a great school, like now, but like it can be better. That's no question of it. So and then that I know that's gonna help me be like more comfortable in my skin too, is to feel like I'm contributing to the campus and making it better.
Yeah. I agree with a lot of that. I think that was really well put. For me, I would also add like writing is something that's really important to me, and it's like really therapeutic for me. And I've been switching my writing lately over the past like several months to writing more on social justice issues. And what's also been new is that I've been like sharing it and I've been like publishing that writing. And that's something that I think is super important because it's allowing me to kind of, yeah, put my voice out there to let my peers, I'm sharing it with my friends, with my teammates, with my professors, I'm sharing it with the Middlebury community, and those beyond the Middlebury community. But I'm saying like, look, here's a look like through through my eyes. Like this is what it's like to be in my skin. Um, like particularly like in this day and age. And I think being able to continue to do that is going to be something that's really important to me. Um, I know I have like it's my last year here, and so um, I do want to that's something that I am thinking about. Like how am I going to leave this place? Am I going to leave it and feel comfortable exiting the Middlebury bubble and feel comfortable like in and confident in my own abilities to simply like exist as a mixed person, as a Black woman, like in this country and in this world. What's that going to look like? um, and I think you know I know for me, like I'm going to need support, and I find that support within the Middlebury community, like on my team, um, within like student athletes of color, like within um, like my other like friend groups here. Like that's I don't know, it's something that's like really important to me, and I know that um, sharing my writing and sharing my thoughts like that is just one way for me to really clearly share like my perspective, and open the door for conversations in the future.
So thank you all for joining us to have this conversation about what it means to be comfortable in our skin at Middlebury, and looking forward to the rest of DEI week, and hope you guys tune in for the next lid episode.